My name is Zelda Harper. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I worked as a senior accountant for a logistics company in Dallas. Numbers made sense to me. Honesty, balance, precision. People, not always. After my husband passed away, I lived quietly in a small condo, believing that peace was something you earned, not something you demanded. I thought I understood fairness, until the day I drove down to see the ranch I had bought for my son. The sun was sharp that morning, blinding against the windshield. I remember thinking how beautiful the hills looked after the rain, the way the air still carried that scent of wet grass and soil. I had imagined this drive 100 times, picturing Evan, my only son, standing by the gate, proud and smiling, ready to show me what he'd built. I had given him everything I could for that second chance. A home, a piece of land, a way to start again after his business collapsed. But when I pulled into the gravel drive, what I saw stopped me cold. Music drifted through the air, the kind of shallow pop song you hear at poolside parties. Laughter, loud and careless. Cars lined the path all the way to the barn. And there, by the turquoise water of the new pool, were faces I didn't recognize, except for one. Donna Pierce, my daughter-in-law's mother, was holding a drink, sunglasses on, her hand waving like she owned the place. Behind her, a banner read, "Pierce Ranch Sunday." I stepped out of the car slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes. My throat tightened. I caught sight of Evan standing near the porch, his hands shoved into his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. Marissa, his wife, looked away the moment our eyes met, and Donna smiled, that practiced smile of people who believe they've already won. "Oh, Zelda," she called, her tone syrupy sweet. "You came unannounced. We've taken over running things here. It's easier this way." She gestured broadly, as if this ranch, the land I'd paid for with the money from selling my retirement home, was just a weekend playground. The words barely registered. I looked around. The pool furniture, the new tiles, the flashy barbecue setup. It was all expensive, tasteless, loud. The quiet charm of the ranch I'd chosen was gone. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On Donna's hand, glinting in the sunlight, was a man's gold wedding ring. My late husband's, the one I'd given Evan years ago to keep safe. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Everything around me blurred. The laughter, the music, the splashing water. It felt like standing in the middle of a movie where I didn't belong anymore. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal almost didn't make sense, you'll understand the silence that follows. That's the moment I felt it. Not rage, not tears, just the deep, echoing quiet of realization. And if you've ever wondered how far love can stretch before it breaks, stay with me. Because what happened after this visit changed my life. And maybe it will make you think about the price of forgiveness too. I took one slow step forward. "Donna," I said quietly, "this isn't your property." She tilted her head, amused. "Oh, we handle everything now. Evan needed help, and we've got the experience. You wouldn't understand, Zelda. It's family now." Family. The word struck like a slap. I turned to my son, waiting for him to speak, to deny it, to defend me. He didn't. His lips pressed into a line, and he stared at the ground. I could see the shame flicker in his face, or maybe it was guilt, but he said nothing. The music swelled again. Someone turned up the volume, maybe to drown out the tension. A breeze passed over the pool, scattering drops of water onto the deck. One of them hit my wrist, cold and sudden. It reminded me of something my husband once said during one of our last evenings together. When people forget what's theirs and what's borrowed, life teaches them the hard way. Donna laughed lightly and lifted her drink. Come join us, Zelda. There's enough wine for everyone. I smiled faintly, not from politeness, but because I understood something in that moment. People who take what isn't theirs often mistake silence for weakness. I've spent my life in silence, balancing books, waiting my turn, carrying others. But this time, I knew my quiet would mean something different. I took a deep breath and said softly, I'll pass. As I turned to leave, I saw Ruthie Gale, the neighbor, standing near her fence. Her eyes met mine, steady, kind, and full of questions she didn't need to ask. I nodded once, the kind of nod two women share when they both recognize something isn't right, but no time will reveal the truth. Walking back to my car, I caught one last glimpse of the ranch. The land was the same, but everything else had changed. The laughter behind me was hollow, the music empty, and though I left that day without saying another word, I carried something heavier than anger. I carried knowledge, and that, I knew, was its own kind of power. That evening, as the sky turned violet over the highway, I replayed every second in my head. The ring, the music, the word family. I realized something simple. Generosity without respect is just an invitation to be erased. When I finally reached home, I set my car keys on the counter and looked at the envelope sitting on my desk. The one I'd used to seal the deed months ago. It had felt like a symbol of love back then, the final act of a mother's faith. Now, under the pale kitchen light, it felt like a weapon waiting to be used. I remember the day I decided to buy the ranch as clearly as if it were yesterday. The air in my condo had smelled of cardboard and dust that morning, boxes half packed, my old photo albums stacked neatly on the coffee table. I was 67 then, freshly retired, still learning how to fill the quiet. Evan had just called the night before. His voice was tight, like he was holding his breath between words. "Mom, it's gone," he said. "The business, everything." I didn't ask how much he'd lost. I didn't ask if it was his fault or someone else's. I just listened to the silence that followed, the kind of silence that has weight. Then I said, "Come home, honey. We'll figure something out." The next morning, I called my financial advisor. Then I called Noah Lang, an old friend from my early accounting days who had gone into law. "You're not buying him another rescue," Noah warned gently when I told him. "Help him rebuild, sure, but don't give away your safety." I smiled, half listening. I'd spent my life calculating risks and returns, but motherhood doesn't work on numbers. It works on hope. And hope, I've learned, is the most expensive investment you can make. A week later, we drove out to see a property in Hill County, a small ranch surrounded by cottonwoods and open sky. The air smelled like hay and sunlight. Evan looked around with a spark I hadn't seen in years. "It feels alive," he said, running a hand over the fence post. His wife, Marissa, smiled timidly. For a moment, I believed this land could be a fresh start for them, a place to breathe, to grow, to heal what had been bruised by disappointment. When the real estate agent placed the contract on the table, I hesitated for only a second. Noah's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "Keep your name on the deed." But Evan was looking at me like a child again, like the boy who once built me a birdhouse out of scrap wood and painted it crooked but blue. I wanted him to believe in himself again, not as a man who had failed, but as a man who could rebuild. So I told the agent, put it under his name. I remember the pen in my hand trembling slightly as I signed the wire transfer. $410,000. Almost everything I'd saved for my later years. The ink bled faintly through the paper, leaving a small shadow underneath my signature. That shadow stayed in my mind, though I didn't understand why at the time. The ranch key came in a small white envelope, the paper thick and rough at the edges. When I held it, it made a soft creak, like old parchment. I pressed it flat, then wrote on the corner, "For Evan and Marissa, your fresh start." That envelope became my symbol of belief. I sealed it carefully, as if sealing a prayer. Months later, when I handed Evan that envelope, his eyes watered. "Mom," he said quietly, "you don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted. "You've carried your failures long enough. Let this be your ground to stand on again." He hugged me tightly. For a moment, I felt something steady return between us, a bridge rebuilt out of faith. I didn't see the warning then. I didn't see that too much giving can blur the lines of respect. Back then, Marissa called me every other day with little updates. "We fixed the fence today," she'd say. "Evan's thinking about opening a small vineyard on the side." Her voice was soft, almost shy. I liked her for that. She reminded me of myself when I was young, wanting to do right, afraid to fail. But over time, the calls grew shorter, the updates less personal. "We're busy," she'd say. "Donna's been helping us manage some finances." That was the first time I heard her mother's name spoken in that tone, like authority. I remember the faint unease that ran through me. Donna Pierce had always been polite to me, but there was something about her that made my instincts stir. Too polished, too certain, like someone who needed to be in charge of every room she entered. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself it was normal for a young couple to want independence, to make their own space. Parents need to step back, I thought. That's what love looks like when it's mature. It trusts. It releases. Now, sitting at my kitchen table after the visit, I could still feel the texture of that envelope under my fingers. I reached for it, the edges worn from handling. When I had sealed it, I thought I was closing a chapter. But it was only the beginning. I remembered how Noah had paused before I left his office months ago. "You're doing something beautiful," he said carefully. "But make sure beauty doesn't blind you. Put something in writing, just in case." He'd slid a paper toward me, an optional clause, a legal safeguard that would allow the property to revert if certain conditions weren't met. I'd smiled, amused by his caution. "I trust my son," I said. "I don't need protection from him." Now those words stung. The irony was bitter and cold. I had built my career teaching people how to keep their assets safe. And yet, in the one act that mattered most, I'd forgotten my own rules. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum, the tick of the wall clock, the echo of Donna's voice saying, "We run this place now." I thought about the banner, the ring, the laughter that wasn't mine. Then I placed the envelope flat on the table, smoothing the creases with my hand. "Not anymore," I whispered. "This isn't over." The ranch had been a gift, but gifts given without respect turn into lessons, and this lesson was far from finished. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I made a pot of coffee and sat by the window, staring at the horizon where the first line of gold began to push through the gray. Sleep had been shallow, haunted by the image of that ring on Donna's hand and the sound of laughter that didn't belong to me. The ranch was supposed to be a sanctuary for my son, a place of healing. Instead, It had become a stage for other people's vanity. By mid-morning, I was driving back. Not to confront anyone, not yet. I told myself I just wanted to make sense of what I'd seen. But, deep down, I think I was already gathering evidence, even if I didn't want to admit it. When I arrived, the gate was open. Music drifted again through the warm air, a different song this time, but just as loud. Donna was already there, sitting near the pool with a wide straw hat and a drink in her hand. She looked up and smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Back so soon, Zelda?" she said, as if the ranch were hers and I were the uninvited guest. I didn't answer. My eyes followed the path of the workers hauling crates toward the barn. The men didn't look familiar. Temporary hires, probably. Sam, the ranch manager I'd met once before, wasn't among them. The thought unsettled me. Donna gestured to the lounge chair next to her. "You could at least relax a little," she said lightly. "You make everyone nervous when you hover." "I'm not nervous," I replied. My voice sounded calm, even to my own surprise. "I'm just watching what's become of the place I bought." She laughed softly. "Bought? Oh, Zelda, you gave it to Evan. You said so yourself, didn't you? You're too generous for your own good." Behind her, Gerald was talking loudly to one of the workers, giving instructions as if he were the foreman. His shirt was untucked, a pair of sunglasses dangling from his collar. He was telling someone to move the boxes of pool supplies into what used to be my small tool shed. I could hear him bragging about how he had streamlined operations. My gaze drifted toward the barn. The large double doors were open, sunlight slanting across the floor in long golden stripes. Something caught my eye. A cardboard box near the back, half crushed. The lid open. I recognized the corner of a photo frame sticking out. I walked toward it, ignoring Donna's voice behind me asking where I was going. Inside the box were old photographs, the ones I'd framed myself the day Evan and Marissa moved in. Pictures of Evan as a child with his father, of our family picnics by the lake, of the first fence post Evan and I had painted together. Most of them were scratched, a few cracked. The one of my husband and me at our 30th anniversary was face down, the glass broken. For a long moment, I stood still. The sounds of laughter and splashing water faint in the distance. Then I noticed the sunlight catching something metallic on the edge of the table nearby. I looked closer. It was my husband's wedding ring, resting on Donna's open notebook. I reached for it, holding it between my fingers. The weight was familiar, heavier than it looked. I remembered the day he'd slipped it off, years ago, before surgery. He had handed it to Evan, saying, "Keep this safe. It's a symbol of everything we built." And now it sat here, beside a stranger's drink, as if it meant nothing. I turned toward the doorway. Donna was watching me from across the yard, still smiling, though her expression had hardened slightly. "Oh, that old thing," she said with a dismissive wave. "Gerald found it in a drawer. He thought it was pretty." I wanted to say something sharp, something that would slice through the pretense and arrogance, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I slipped the ring into my pocket. Her eyes flicked down, noticing, but she said nothing. The silence between us was sharp enough to cut. As I walked back outside, I saw Marissa standing by the porch steps, holding a tray of lemonade. Her face looked pale, uneasy. When our eyes met, she didn't smile. She just nodded slightly, as if to say she understood more than she could admit. I set the ring gently into my palm and said quietly, "Where's Sam?" She hesitated. He's been off for a few days. Mom said we didn't need him right now." I could hear Donna's laughter again, light and hollow. It echoed against the pool tiles like something artificial. I turned toward the hills. The ranch stretched wide and golden beyond the noise, still beautiful beneath the surface. I promised myself I would not let their chaos take that away. When I reached my car, I paused to look back. The pool shimmered, the music thumped, and Donna reclined like a queen in her borrowed kingdom. Evan was at the edge of the patio, talking to Gerald, avoiding my gaze again. I started the engine, but before pulling away, I glanced into the rearview mirror. Ruthie Gale stood by her fence again, arms crossed, her eyes narrow with quiet concern. She didn't wave, and neither did I. But that look, we both understood it. She was watching too. As I drove home, I thought about what my husband used to tell me during tax season, when the numbers didn't add up. When something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. You don't fix it by hoping, it takes proof. By the time I reached my driveway, the first idea had already taken shape in my mind. Proof. I didn't need confrontation. I needed records, documents, signatures, things that couldn't lie. The ring sat heavy in my pocket. I closed my hand around it, the metal cool against my skin. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny circle of gold would become my reminder of everything that had been stolen and everything I intended to reclaim. The next afternoon, I drove back to the ranch, this time without announcement. The air was thick with the smell of sunscreen and grilled meat again, though quieter now. Just a few people lingering near the pool. I parked near the barn, pretending to check something in the trunk so no one would notice me right away. I found Evan near the fence line, hammering a loose board without much focus. His movements were slow, distracted, more like a man pretending to work than fixing anything real. When he looked up and saw me, his face tensed. "Mom," he said, trying for a smile that didn't land. "Didn't know you were coming back so soon." "I needed to see you," I replied, my tone even. "We didn't get to talk yesterday." He hesitated, glancing toward the house. "Donna's inside. Maybe now's not a good time." I stepped closer. "Then it's the perfect time," he sighed, dropping the hammer. "Mom, look. I know what this looks like, but it's not what you think. Donna and Gerald, they're just helping us. They've got more experience managing property. You know I've never handled something this big before." I studied his face carefully. The boy I had raised was still somewhere inside that man, but he was buried under layers of fear and pride. "Helping?" I asked. "By putting their name on the sign out front? By firing Sam? By turning your home into their vacation spot?" He winced. "It's temporary. They've fronted some money for the pool. They said it'll help with resale value down the line. It's not like they're taking over." I wanted to believe him, but the words didn't match the world around us. The patio furniture, the expensive equipment, the constant noise, it all screamed ownership. I turned toward the house, the new paint catching the sunlight in a glossy glare. "You said they fronted the money," I said quietly. "Where did that money come from, Evan?" He looked away. "Don't do this," he muttered, but I was already walking toward the kitchen door. Inside, the place smelled like lemon cleaner and something artificial, vanilla candles maybe. On the counter, there was a stack of envelopes, receipts sticking out. I didn't touch them at first. Then one slipped free, half open, revealing a contractor invoice for $12,000, marked paid in full. The name on the check wasn't Evans. It was Harper Ranch Management, Donna Pierce. Behind me, Donna's voice floated in like perfume. "Zelda," she said sweetly, "you really should call before coming. We're in the middle of organizing things." I turned slowly, holding the receipt between two fingers. "Organizing?" She smiled. "Just routine work. You know how these places are. Bills, maintenance, improvements. Evan's still learning the ropes. Learning, I repeated. My voice was soft, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Is that what you call it? Her eyes flickered, but she didn't back down. I understand this must be difficult for you, she said, every word coated with that false sympathy she wore like jewelry. Letting go is never easy. I didn't let go, I said. I gave. Donna's smile tightened. Same thing, isn't it? Before I could answer, Evan appeared in the doorway. Mom, please, not now. Then when? I asked. The room went still. When it's gone completely? He looked tired, defeated. You don't understand how hard it's been. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that people who want your best don't take what isn't theirs. Donna reached for a folder on the counter, flipping it open, casually, as if to remind me who controlled the paperwork now. Evan signed everything he needed to, she said. It's all legitimate. My gaze sharpened. What exactly did he sign? Her lips curved slightly, but she didn't answer. Evan rubbed his forehead. Mom, please. You're making this worse. I'm trying to make it right, I said. My tone was calm, almost too calm. Years in accounting had taught me one thing. When people hide something, their silence speaks louder than their words. I walked past them toward the back office. The air inside was cooler, filled with the faint hum of a small fan. A pile of unopened mail sat on the desk, beside a laptop logged in but dim. Another folder lay open. Payroll sheets. I noticed Sam Becker's name at the bottom of the list. Next to it, in red ink, were the words pending payment. My stomach tightened. Sam had worked for us for years. Steady, reliable, the kind of man who'd rather go hungry than steal. If he wasn't being paid, something was deeply wrong. I picked up the sheet and turned to Evan. You're behind on payroll? He hesitated. Donna said the funds would clear soon. Donna laughed lightly behind him. Oh, for heaven's sake, Zelda. You're acting like this is a scandal. We're just reorganizing. I set the papers down and looked her straight in the eye. You're right, I said softly. It's not a scandal, not yet. For a second, the air in the room froze. Gerald's voice called from outside, but neither of us moved. Finally, I turned to Evan. You may not believe me now, but there will come a day when you'll see what this really is. And when that day comes, I hope you'll remember who warned you first. I left before either of them could reply. The sun was lowering, painting the fields in amber. I paused by the fence he'd been fixing earlier. The board still hung loose, half-nailed, a job left unfinished. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the rough wood under my skin. Fences, I thought, are meant to protect what's inside. But they can't help much when the betrayal's already within. That night, I drove out again, quietly, no headlights near the main gate. The ranch looked different in the dark. The party noise was gone, replaced by the low hum of cicadas and the distant rustle of wind against the grass. The pool lights flickered near the patio, their glow trembling over the water like something fragile trying to hold its shape. I parked by the barn and stepped out, my shoes crunching against the gravel, the scent of hay mixed with the faint trace of chlorine. I could see the outline of someone moving near the barn doors, a lantern in hand. When the light lifted, I recognized Sam. He turned when he saw me and smiled faintly. "Evening, Mrs. Harper," he said, setting the lantern on a wooden crate. "Didn't expect you tonight." "I couldn't sleep," I answered. "Seems like I'm not the only one." Sam nodded. "Been checking on the horses. They've been restless lately. Guess they feel it too. How things have changed around here." I stepped closer. the air warm and still. Donna told me you haven't been paid. His smile faded. She said there was a delay. Gerald mentioned some new accounts being processed. Did Evan tell you that? He hesitated. He tried to, but it's not him running the books anymore. It's her. He didn't have to say the name. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the lantern flame flickering. Dust floated through the air, catching bits of light. Sam leaned against a post, his voice low. You know, people talk, Mrs. Harper. Donna's been telling folks around town that she owns this place now. Says her family invested in it. I stared at him, the words landing like stones. And people believe her? He sighed. Some do. You know how it goes. Loud voices get heard first. But most of us who know you, we know better. I felt something tighten inside me. Not anger exactly, but a deep ache of recognition. I had seen this pattern before, in business, in family disputes, in the small betrayals that grow when no one stops them. It starts with confidence, then possession, then rewriting history. I should have seen it coming, I said quietly. Sam looked at me, eyes steady. You couldn't have. You trusted them. That's not weakness, ma'am. That's just being decent. His words were kind, but they didn't soften the truth. Decency, I murmured, only works if everyone plays by the same rules. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring I'd found. It gleamed faintly in the lantern light. Sam's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Harper's? He asked, and I nodded. She wears it sometimes, like it's hers. He let out a slow breath. That's cruel. I slipped the ring back into my pocket. Cruel, yes, but not irreversible. Sam studied me for a moment, then said, You've got that look in your eye again, the one you used to get when the numbers didn't add up. I smiled faintly. Then you remember what came after. He chuckled softly. You fixed it. I will, I said. The lantern hissed softly as the flame flickered. Outside, the moon had climbed high enough to paint silver lines across the fences. I remembered how my husband used to sit at the kitchen table late at night, reviewing ledgers with that quiet patience of his. When you can't fight noise with noise, he'd tell me, fight it with paper. Paper doesn't shout. It just proves. I took a breath, feeling the weight of that lesson settle into me. Sam, I said, I'm going to need a few things from you. Records, timesheets, anything that shows what's been changed or ignored. He nodded immediately. You got it. I kept copies. I didn't trust how they started filing things after she took over. Good man. He hesitated before speaking again. Mrs. Harper, can I say something? People around here still respect you. But Donna, she's trying to change that story. Says you gave the place up because you couldn't handle it anymore. That you were too old to manage it. I felt the sting of those words, but they didn't surprise me. Then I'll remind them what truth looks like. Sam gave a slow nod, a small smile at the corner of his mouth. Thought you might say that. We stood there under the barn light for another minute, neither of us needing to fill the silence. The light swung slightly in the breeze, throwing soft shadows across the walls. Somewhere outside, a horse snorted, impatient, sensing the tension humans always carried with them. As I turned to leave, Sam said quietly, Whatever you're planning, ma'am, you're not alone. Folks around here see more than they let on. I met his eyes. I know, thank you. When I got back into my car, the night felt heavier, but also clearer. The outlines of the land passed by in dark waves as I drove home. I rolled down the window and let the air move through, carrying away some of the bitterness. By the time I reached my driveway, my resolve had hardened. I took out my phone and scrolled to Noah Lang's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and familiar. "Zelda," he said, "I was wondering when you'd call." I didn't waste words. "I need your help," quietly. He didn't ask for details. "I'll be at my office in the morning." When I hung up, I looked at the old envelope on my desk once more. Its edges were worn now. The seal cracked slightly at the corners. It had started as a symbol of faith, but I could feel it shifting into something else. A tool, a weapon made of paper and silence. I turned off the lights, letting the dark settle around me. The quiet wasn't peaceful this time, but purposeful. Somewhere inside that quiet, a plan had already begun to take shape. The next morning, I drove to town and parked across from the law office just as the sun rose over the square. The street was quiet except for a man sweeping the front of a bakery and the low hum of a delivery truck idling at the curb. I sat for a moment before going in, watching the way the light cut across the courthouse steps. How calm everything looked on the surface. Calm, I thought, was how deception survived. Noah Lang's office hadn't changed in 20 years. The same wooden blinds, the same faint smell of coffee and paper. He looked up from his desk when I entered, his glasses sliding slightly down his nose. "Zelda," he said, standing to shake my hand. "You look tired." "I am," I replied, "but I've been worse." He gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the ranch, the pool party, the unpaid wages, the invoices under Donna's name. I told him about the ring, about Sam, about how my son's signature had appeared on paperwork he probably didn't understand. Noah didn't interrupt. He just listened, taking notes in that small, precise handwriting I remembered from our old days at the firm. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I warned you about co-ownership," he said gently, not to shame but to remind. "I know." He tapped his pen against the pad. "Donna and Gerald are clever, but not clever enough to hide a financial trail. We'll find it. People who build their power on manipulation always leave paper behind. They just think no one's patient enough to look." "I'm patient," I said. He smiled faintly. "I know you are. That's why they'll regret underestimating you." A few hours later, we met Sophie Lynn, a loan officer at the local bank. She was younger than I expected, brisk and professional, with a clipped tone that suggested she'd seen her share of small-town schemes. Noah had called her ahead of time. She greeted me politely and spread a folder across the table. "Mr. Lang told me you're the original purchaser of the Harper Ranch property," she said. "Your name isn't on the current deed, but I cross-referenced the address with recent credit applications. You may want to see this." She turned the folder toward me. Inside were photocopies, applications for business credit lines, all registered to Harper Ranch Management, with Donna Pierce listed as managing partner. "She's using the ranch as collateral?" I asked quietly. Sophie nodded. "She's tried to open 2 lines so far. The first was denied for insufficient authorization. The second is still pending. We flagged it because her documentation looks off." She paused, then slid one form closer. "This signature here, supposedly from your son, doesn't match his legal signature on file. Someone traced it." I stared at the page. The pen strokes were stiff, uneven, as if copied from memory. My chest tightened. Noah examined it closely. "Forgery," he said flatly. "Sloppy, but dangerous if left unchecked." Sophie continued. There's more. She also tried to register an ATM business using the same address as her mailing location. That triggered a compliance review. The fraud department will move slowly unless there's a formal complaint from someone with a stake in the property. Noah looked at me. That's where you come in. I nodded. What do we need? Documentation of your purchase, Sophie said. Original transfer receipts, bank statements, anything linking your funds to the acquisition. It establishes your standing. I have all of that, I replied. Every receipt, every transfer record. Good, Noah said. We'll file a preliminary notice of interest. It doesn't claim ownership yet, but it flags the property as disputed. That should freeze her ability to leverage it further. I exhaled slowly, feeling the first small weight lift off my chest. So this will stop her? For now, Noah said. But she'll notice, and when she does, she'll push harder. I'm counting on it, I answered. Sophie's expression softened. I've seen people like her before, she said. They act entitled, but panic fast when someone pushes back with facts. I smiled faintly. Paper never panics. Noah chuckled quietly. That's the Zelda I remember. As we finalized the forms, I noticed a detail in one of the photocopies. A note scrawled in the margin beside Donna's signature. Expedite, family business. The handwriting was bold, confident. She wasn't even hiding it. She believed she was untouchable. When I left the bank, the day had turned hot. The asphalt shimmered as I crossed the parking lot. A folder of documents pressed tightly under my arm. I could feel the faint pulse of purpose again, the kind that comes after you've stopped being shocked and started taking control. At a red light, I looked down at the steering wheel, the sunlight reflecting off the small gold ring I'd moved from my pocket onto my finger. It fit perfectly, though it wasn't meant for me. I wasn't wearing it out of sentiment this time. It was a reminder. A circle never ends, but it can be reclaimed. Back home, I cleared my dining table and laid out the documents like pieces of a puzzle. Receipts, emails, contracts, even the realtor's handwritten notes. Every number, every date had to line up. That's how you build a case. Not through rage, but through order. When evening fell, I called Sam and told him I'd need copies of the employment records and any correspondence with Donna or Gerald. He said he'd bring them by at dawn. Before hanging up, he added quietly, "People are starting to talk, Mrs. Harper. Word is, Donna's bragging she'll refinance the place in her name within the month." "Let her brag," I said. "The louder she gets, the easier it'll be to hear her fall." After the call, I turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a while. The paper spread before me, glowing faintly in the moonlight through the window. Proof, I thought. That's all I ever needed. Proof and patience. And both were now in my hands. Morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the papers I'd left scattered across the table the night before. Proof had shape now. Ink, stamps, signatures. It felt solid in my hands. But as I stared at those documents, another kind of weight settled in my chest. Justice, I realized, could expose a lie, but it couldn't erase what that lie had cost me. I drove back to the ranch that afternoon. It was quiet this time. No laughter, no music. Only the wind moving through the dry grass, whispering against the fence posts. I parked near the barn where Sam had said he'd leave the records for me and found an envelope tucked inside the door. Payroll summaries, emails, Donna's notes on staffing, all dated and neatly copied. He'd done more than I asked. That man understood loyalty better than most blood relatives. As I turned to leave, I saw Marissa standing near the porch, her arms folded tightly, her expression nervous. She looked smaller somehow, her usual brightness dimmed. I walked toward her and she didn't move away. "Evan's inside," she said softly. "He's been distant lately. Keeps saying he's handling it, but he doesn't sleep." I studied her face. "Handling what?" She glanced toward the house, then back at me. "My mother, Gerald, the money, all of it." Her voice broke slightly. "I thought they were helping us, but now I see they're helping themselves." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I found something," she whispered. She reached into her jacket and handed me a small flash drive. "I recorded her the night of the party. She didn't know. She was talking about you, about how she planned to refinance the ranch once she got Evan to sign the papers." My fingers tightened around the flash drive. "Does Evan know?" She shook her head. "Not yet. He wouldn't believe me. He thinks loyalty means silence, but silence only helps the people who use it." For the first time since meeting her, I saw not the timid daughter-in-law, but a woman fighting between two worlds. One she was raised in and one she wanted to belong to. "Thank you, Marissa," I said quietly. "You just gave me the missing piece." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Zelda. I should have said something sooner." I placed a hand on her arm. "We all wake up at our own time." She nodded, then turned away quickly, heading back inside. I walked to my car, slid the flash drive into the pocket of my blazer, and sat for a moment staring at the horizon. Something about the stillness made me think of the past, the kind of memories that sneak up when your heart's too tired to fight. I drove home without the radio on, letting the silence carry me. That evening, I found myself opening the old cedar chest I kept in my guest room closet. It had been years since I'd looked inside. Dust coated the lid, and the hinges creaked when I lifted it. Beneath the folded blankets and photo albums sat a small wooden box, painted blue and worn at the corners. Evan's handwriting was still visible on the top. For Mom. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly. Inside were the pieces of his childhood, Polaroids from his first fishing trip, a small screwdriver he'd used to fix his toy cars, a school ribbon folded in half. Beneath them was a cassette tape, labeled in faded ink, "For you, Mom." I found an old recorder in the drawer and pressed play. The sound crackled before his young voice filled the room, bright and proud. "Hi, Mom. It's me. I just wanted to say I love you. And when I'm big, I'll buy you a house so you don't have to work anymore." The tape clicked off, leaving a thin hum of static. My hands trembled as I set it down. I hadn't heard that voice in decades, but it hit me like sunlight after a storm. Pure, unguarded, the kind of love that comes before the world teaches us to hide. I pressed my palms to my face and let the silence stretch. The grief wasn't about money or property anymore. It was about a boy who had grown up believing he had to impress everyone else to be worthy of the things he already had. When I looked up again, the room was dim. The last trace of daylight had slipped away, replaced by the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside. I reached for the phone and played the voicemail he'd left me months ago, before everything began. His voice was weary then, older, but still threaded with that same small need for reassurance. "Mom, I messed up, again, but I'll fix it. I promise." It was strange how guilt and love could sound so similar when spoken softly. I set the phone down and stared at the envelope on my desk. The deed. The clause Noah had once suggested. The one I dismissed as unnecessary. Now, I realized, it might be the only way to save him from what he'd become. and from the people using his shame to destroy him. My hand brushed the edge of the memory box, tracing the small scratches Evan's little screwdriver had left years ago. For the first time in days, I felt clarity instead of anger. I would fight, not to punish him, but to remind him who he really was. I placed the flash drive next to the documents, aligning them neatly. Proof and memory, logic and love, two halves of the same truth. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees against the windows. It sounded almost like the sea, calm and distant. I closed the box and whispered to the quiet room, "All right, my boy, let's bring you home." By the time July came around, the whole town had heard about the Pierces' Independence Bash. Flyers sat in grocery store windows, posts flooded social media. Photos of the ranch decked out with flags and banners calling it the Pierce Family Ranch Celebration. I stared at one while waiting in line at the market, my reflection staring back at me from the glass door of the cooler. Independence, I thought. Some people used that word too easily. When I arrived that afternoon, the sky shimmered with heat. Cars lined both sides of the dusty road, families trailing laughter and the smell of barbecue as they walked up the gravel path. Donna never missed a chance to turn other people's property into her stage. I parked far from the crowd and walked slowly toward the house, carrying a small tin of cookies. People greeted me with polite smiles, the kind that hide questions. Most didn't know what to say. A few glanced at me like I was an unexpected guest at my own home. Donna stood by the pool, radiant in red and white, greeting neighbors as if she'd been born to host. Gerald hovered nearby, sweating under his linen shirt, handing out drinks. A large wooden sign hung behind them, reading Pierce Ranch Bash. The letters shimmered gold in the sunlight. I caught sight of Evan standing near the barn, his posture stiff, his face pale. He wasn't laughing, not even pretending. When he noticed me, his eyes widened slightly, guilt flashing through them like a shadow. Donna spotted me next. Her smile didn't falter, though her voice rose a notch. "Zelda, I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss seeing how well my investment's being celebrated," I said evenly. Her laugh was too sharp. "Oh, you. Still thinking like an accountant. It's all just fun, dear. You've been working too hard at worrying." I handed her the tin. "Cookies?" I said. "Family recipe." She took them, a touch of confusion breaking her composure. "That's thoughtful." "It's tradition," I said softly. "To bring something to the home you're invited into, even if it used to be yours." The crowd shifted then, the band striking up a tune. Children ran around with sparklers, dogs barked, and for a moment, the noise drowned everything else. I stepped aside, finding a spot near the porch railing where I could watch without being part of it. Ruthie Gale appeared beside me, her sun hat pulled low, holding a lemonade. "You're braver than I am," she murmured. "Why's that?" "I wouldn't have set foot here after what she's done." "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to watch." Ruthie gave me a knowing look. "You always were the patient kind." From across the yard, Donna was boasting to a group of guests about the new pool and patio. "Of course, maintaining a place like this takes resources," she was saying. "But it's worth it. We've already filed for the business license. Pierce Ranch will host events by fall." Several heads turned when they heard that, whispers spreading quickly. I took a slow sip of lemonade, feeling the exact moment her words landed where I needed them to. "Funny thing about licenses," I said loud enough for her and her circle to hear. "They tend to draw attention from the county tax assessor." Donna blinked. I'm sorry? I smiled gently. Well, I just hope the property taxes are being handled properly. It would be a shame if the county realized they hadn't been paid since last spring. The chatter around her quieted. Gerald's head jerked up. What are you implying? He asked, his voice sharp. Nothing at all, I replied. I just know the assessor's office takes holiday weekends off. But come Monday, I imagine they'll be curious. Donna's face stiffened. She forced a laugh that didn't fool anyone. Oh, you're always so dramatic, Zelda. We've got everything under control. I tilted my head slightly. I'm sure you do. Across the yard, Noah stood discreetly by the fence, his camera angled just enough to catch Donna's outburst, Gerald's flustered attempt to interrupt her, and the murmurs spreading through the guests. He gave me a brief nod, the kind of signal only old colleagues recognize. The evidence was now public. Admissions spoken aloud, witnessed by a crowd. Evan stepped forward, trying to defuse the scene. Let's not do this now, he said quietly. Donna snapped. Don't tell me what to do, Evan. You wouldn't even have this place if it weren't for me. The words echoed sharply. Even the band faltered for a moment. Evan's face drained of color. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The silence of judgment had already done its work. Donna seemed to realize what she'd said too late. She laughed again, brittle and forced. Oh, everyone knows I'm joking. But no one laughed with her. Ruthie's voice cut through softly, calm but clear. Doesn't sound like a joke to me. The air shifted. A few guests began to leave quietly, murmuring to each other. The spell Donna had cast, the illusion of power, was starting to crack. I walked toward the gate, each step slow and steady. Evan stood by the porch, his hand gripping the railing, his eyes on the ground. As I passed, I paused beside him. You can't serve two masters, son, I said softly. Sooner or later, you'll have to choose who you really are. He didn't answer, but his jaw tightened, and for the first time, he looked ashamed rather than defensive. That was enough for now. When I reached my car, the music had started again, but it sounded different, hollow, strained. I glanced back once. The flag above the porch flapped wildly in the wind, its shadow cutting across the sign that bore the Pierce's name. Independence Day, I thought. For some, it's just a date. For others, it's a reckoning. I started the engine, the envelope of evidence resting on the seat beside me. The road stretched ahead, shimmering with heat. But for the first time in weeks, I felt the air shift in my favor. They had declared their ownership in public. Now it was time to show them what ownership really meant. The morning after the 4th of July party, the phone rang before sunrise. I was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold. The documents from the bank spread out in front of me. Noah's voice came through steady and focused. Zelda, we found something. You might want to come down to the county records office right now. The drive was long and silent. The highway shimmered with that pale gold light that only comes at dawn, when the world hasn't quite decided if it wants to wake. I kept both hands on the wheel, the same way I used to before closing a deal, focused, alert, rehearsing every question in my mind. When I arrived, Noah was waiting at the front steps with a folder tucked under his arm. He didn't smile. You were right, he said. It's worse than we thought. Inside, the clerk led us to a small room filled with filing cabinets and the scent of dust and paper. Noah laid the folder flat on the table and opened it carefully. Here, he said, pointing to a printed form. This is a lien notice filed 2 weeks ago. It lists Gerald Pierce as the secured party on an extension note. I scanned the document. Extension of what? The original loan, Noah said quietly. Evan signed an extension agreement. It restructured the ranch's property loan with Gerald as lien holder. Essentially, your son just made your daughter-in-law's father the creditor of your own land. The words sank like a stone in my stomach. He wouldn't have done that willingly. Noah adjusted his glasses. I believe you. The problem is, his signature's there, and that means the county is processing the lien right now. I looked closer at the print. The signature was familiar. Evan's, but different somehow, shakier, rushed. He was pressured, I whispered. She's been holding something over him. Noah nodded. Most likely his debt. Gerald used it as leverage. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Every decision, every sacrifice I'd made had led to this. My son so desperate to keep his pride intact that he'd unknowingly handed over what little remained of our legacy. How long do we have? I asked finally. Maybe a week before it clears, Noah said. Once it does, Gerald gains full legal power to act on behalf of the property. He could sell it, refinance it, even claim eviction rights. We can challenge it, but we'll need something solid to prove original intent. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. There's something you don't know, I said. When you drafted that conditional deed last year, I kept it. You said it was optional, a protection clause I'd never need. But it's still valid, isn't it? Noah's eyes widened slightly. You still have it? In the envelope. He exhaled sharply. Then yes, if that clause was properly notarized and you funded the original purchase directly, it gives you the right to reclaim ownership in the event of a fraudulent transfer or debt manipulation. It's not common, but it's airtight. A calmness spread through me, the kind that comes when chaos finally reveals its logic. Then we'll activate it, I said. Noah nodded, his voice lowering. Once we file this, it'll trigger a review. Gerald and Donna will know within days. Are you ready for that? I've been ready since the moment she said, "We run this place now." Sophie arrived a few minutes later, carrying additional documents from the bank's fraud department. You'll want to see this, she said, spreading them beside Noah's folder. Donna attempted to refinance again yesterday. She forged Evan's initials this time. It's already flagged. I looked at the forged signature, clumsy and overconfident. She's getting careless, I said. Good. Noah gathered everything neatly into one packet. We'll file the deed and attach all supporting evidence, fraud attempts, lien transfer, and misrepresentation of ownership. Once submitted, the property legally reverts to you pending investigation. Sophie glanced between us. This could ruin them. I met her eyes. That's not my goal. I just want the truth to stand again. We left the office together, the folder heavy in my hands. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering leaves across the courthouse steps. Noah paused by the door. Zelda, he said, when this is over, your son will have to face what he signed. Are you prepared for that conversation? I don't think any mother ever is, I said softly. But I'll face it anyway. He nodded. I'll draft the paperwork. You sign this afternoon. Once the clerk stamps it, it's official. Back in my car, I sat for a moment before turning the key. My reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror. Older, steadier, but not defeated. I thought of Evan as a child, standing on a wooden crate to reach the counter, proudly handing me the allowance he'd saved for my birthday gift. He'd said, "It's not much, but I wanted to give you something that's mine." And now, years later, he'd given away something that was never his to lose. I drove home with the windows down, the wind catching my hair, the ring on my finger glinting against the light. It reminded me of my husband's steady voice. Don't meet greed with noise. Meet it with proof. When I reached my driveway, I pulled the envelope from the desk drawer and set it on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges, the seal still unbroken. My handwriting on the front was steady and deliberate. Harper Ranch. Conditional deed. I ran a finger along the crease, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Faith, trust, loss, and now power reclaimed. I didn't open it yet. Not until I was standing face to face with my son. That envelope had started as a gift of love. Now it would be the quiet truth that set things right. The evening after Noah filed the papers, I found myself driving back to the ranch one last time before everything turned official. The road stretched long and gold under the fading sun, and for a moment, it felt like time had slowed, holding its breath. I wasn't sure whether I was going to see my son or to say goodbye to the part of myself that still believed this could end gently. Evan was waiting on the porch when I arrived. He must have seen the dust trail from my car winding down the hill. He looked thinner, older than I remembered, as if guilt had carved new lines into his face. Marissa stood inside the doorway, watching silently. "Mom," he said, his voice small. "You came." I stepped up onto the porch, folding my hands in front of me. "You sound surprised." He looked down. "I thought you'd given up on me." I let the silence stretch before I spoke. "I never give up on my son. I just stopped protecting him from himself." He flinched, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft rattle of wind through the trees and the faint creak of the porch boards beneath our feet. "I know I've made a mess of things," he said finally. "Donna, Gerald, they said they'd help. I didn't see what was happening until it was too late." "Didn't see or didn't want to?" I asked quietly. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes glistening. "I was embarrassed, Mom. I didn't want you to think I failed again. I thought if I could just make it work this time, you'd be proud of me." I looked at him, my grown son still carrying the same hunger for approval he'd had at 12 years old. "Pride isn't bought, Evan. It's earned by doing what's right, not what looks right." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." It should have felt like relief, but it didn't. There was something too neat about it. Too sudden. "Sorry doesn't fix signatures on forged papers," I said. "It doesn't pay Sam's wages or unwrite the lies Donna's been telling the community." He took a step closer. "I'll make it right. I'll talk to them. We'll straighten it out." "You can't negotiate with people who don't believe in fairness," I said softly. "You already tried that." He didn't answer, but his eyes darted toward the living room window. I turned to look. On the table inside was a small stack of papers, bound with a ribbon, new documents, freshly printed. Something about the way they sat there made my stomach tighten. "What are those?" I asked. He hesitated. "Donna dropped them off. She said they're just updates for the loan extension. Nothing serious." I stepped past him and into the house. The air smelled faintly of perfume and printer ink. The papers were still warm. I slid one free and felt the breath catch in my throat. It was another transfer notice. Dated yesterday, marked urgent. Evan's name sat at the bottom, the signature smoother this time. Cleaner. "This isn't your writing," I said. He froze. "She said it was just..." I turned toward him sharply. "She forged it again. And you let her hand you the pen." His shoulders slumped. "I didn't sign it, Mom. I swear." Before I could reply, a knock sounded at the door. Ruthie stood there, holding a folded piece of paper. Her expression told me everything before she spoke. "Zelda," she said softly, "you should see this." It was posted at the general store. She handed me the flyer. Pierce Ranch, now under new management. Beneath it was a phone number and an email for event bookings and tours. Donna's name sat proudly at the bottom. Marissa stepped forward from the hallway, her face pale. "I told her to stop," she whispered. "She said it was already done." I folded the flyer carefully and placed it on the table. "So this is her idea of helping," I said. Evan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I didn't know she'd gone this far." "You didn't want to know," I replied. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For a brief moment, I almost reached out to touch his shoulder, but stopped myself. Sympathy had protected him long enough. What he needed now was truth. Ruthie lingered near the door. "I thought you'd want to know," she said softly. "Thank you," I said. As she left, the house fell into silence again. Evan looked up at me with the hollow eyes of a man cornered by his own mistakes. "What do I do now?" I took a deep breath. "You stop lying. To me, to yourself, to her, and then you get out of the way." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done asking," I said calmly. "I'm acting." Marissa stepped forward. "Zelda, please don't hurt him. He's trying." I turned to her. "I'm not here to hurt him. I'm here to stop this before it ruins what's left of him." Evan's voice broke. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I know," I said quietly. "But meaning well doesn't make you innocent." The air between us trembled with something fragile. Regret, love, exhaustion. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the empty flagpole near the barn. It sounded like a warning. I walked to the doorway and looked out at the field where my husband's ashes were scattered years ago. The light was fading fast now, the sky bruising into purple. I thought of his voice again, steady, kind, unshakable. "When the ground shifts beneath you, stand still until you remember who you are." I turned back to Evan. "You'll remember soon enough." Then I picked up the flyer, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the same envelope that held the conditional deed. The paper fit perfectly, like two halves of one truth, what they claimed and what I still owned. When I left the ranch, the house lights glowed behind me, soft and uncertain. I could see Evan's silhouette through the window, standing motionless by the table. Marissa moved beside him, her hand on his shoulder. For the first time, he didn't pull away. As I drove down the long dirt road, the dust rising behind me, I realized how quiet my mind felt. The time for pleading was over. The time for proof had come. Dusk settled over the valley like a slow breath. The light softened to amber, and the hills behind the ranch looked almost gentle again, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But peace has a way of lying to you before the truth comes out. That evening, I drove to the ranch for the last time as a visitor. The next time I left it, the papers in my hand would make me its rightful owner again. Evan was sitting alone on the porch steps when I pulled up. The house behind him was dark except for a single lamp burning in the kitchen. He didn't stand as I walked toward him. His head hung low, shoulders sagged under a weight that looked heavier than guilt. "I knew you'd come," he said quietly. I stopped in front of him. "Then you also know why." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I don't deserve to ask for your forgiveness." "Then don't ask," I said. "Just listen." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the low hum of cicadas and the sound of wind brushing through the dry grass. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope, the same one that had once held the deed to this land. Its edges were worn now, the paper slightly yellowed, but it still carried the same quiet authority it had the day I signed it. He looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's that?" "This," I said softly, "is what's left of your father's faith, my work, and your future." I opened the envelope slowly, the paper making that faint creak I'd heard a year ago when I first sealed it. Inside was the conditional deed Noah had drafted, a clause I once dismissed as unnecessary. I laid it on the step between us. "Do you remember when you said you wanted to make this place your legacy?" I asked. He nodded, his voice trembling. "I wanted to give you something to be proud of." "You still can," I said, "but not by pretending nothing happened." I pointed to the document. "This ranch reverts to my ownership effective today. Every fraudulent transfer, every misuse, every signature forged under Donna's manipulation. It ends here. The papers are filed. The law is clear." His breath caught. "You mean it's yours again?" I met his eyes. "Ours, if you learn what that word truly means." He covered his face with his hands, and for a long time, he didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mom." "You're still my son," I said quietly. "Just one who lost his way, but that doesn't mean you stay lost." He looked up at me then, tears gathering but not falling. "I thought I was helping her. I thought if I kept the peace, things would stay normal." "Peace built on fear isn't peace," I said. "It's surrender." From inside the house, I heard Marissa's voice. "Zelda?" She stepped onto the porch, her face pale but determined. In her hand was the small flash drive she had given me before. "I made a copy," she said softly. "The recording of my mother, her confession about the refinancing. I wanted Evan to hear it." Evan's eyes widened. "You recorded her?" Marissa nodded. "I had to. She was hurting all of us. I didn't know how else to make you see." He took the flash drive from her, staring at it as though it burned in his palm. "I don't deserve either of you." "No," I said. "But you can start deserving yourself." I folded the deed and slipped it back into the envelope. The weight of it felt different now, no longer love or regret, but resolution. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "Noah will meet me here with the sheriff. Donna and Gerald will be served. I won't humiliate them. I'll just end the story they started." Evan stood slowly. "What happens after that?" "That depends on what you do next," I said. "The ranch is safe, but the damage isn't fixed. You'll need to make things right, with Sam, with the community, with yourself." He nodded weakly. "I will." Marissa reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. I saw something flicker between them. Fear, maybe, but also the fragile start of unity. The porch light flickered once as the wind picked up, scattering dust along the steps. I looked toward the open fields, golden even under the dimming sky. "Your father used to say, paper can save a man if he knows how to read what it means," I said. "Today, that paper saved you, but you'll have to live up to what it cost." Evan whispered, "You did this to protect me." "No," I said softly. "I did it to remind you who you are." He reached out as if to take the envelope, but I pulled it back gently. "Not yet. You'll earn it when the work's done." For a while, none of us moved. The last light of the sun dipped below the hills, and the first stars began to appear, faint, scattered, uncertain. Marissa turned toward Evan, her hand tightening around his. He looked at her the way a drowning man looks at a rope. When I finally turned to leave, Evan said quietly, "Mom, thank you." I stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked back at him. "Don't thank me," I said. "Just build something honest." As I walked to my car, I heard the creak of the porch behind me, the soft murmur of their voices blending with the night air. The envelope rested on the seat beside me, its contents now a shield rather than a gift. Before starting the engine, I whispered to the empty air, "It's done." But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't the end. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning, and after that, maybe, just maybe, peace. The sky was still pale when I reached the ranch at dawn. A thin mist rolled over the fields, blurring the edges of the fences, the barn, the rows of eucalyptus along the drive. The world felt quiet, suspended in that fragile hour before light and consequence meet. I parked by the gate and waited, listening to the distant hum of a truck climbing the hill. It was Noah. Behind him, another vehicle followed, the county sheriff's car. Evan stood on the porch when I stepped out. He looked as though he hadn't slept. His hands were jammed in his pockets, his eyes hollow. Marissa stood beside him, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I could see how much she wanted to believe this would end without destruction. Noah got out first, carrying a folder tucked neatly under his arm. The sheriff followed, a sturdy man with calm eyes who looked like he'd done this too many times before. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked, politely. I nodded. "Thank you for coming." He tipped his hat. "It's always better when folks handle these things with dignity. Let's keep it that way." Donna and Gerald arrived just minutes later. They pulled up fast, tires spitting dust, the sound breaking through the still air like an insult. Donna stepped out first, her red silk blouse bright against the pale morning. Gerald followed, already scowling. "What is this?" Donna snapped. "We get a call at 6 a.m. saying there's some legal nonsense happening on our property." "Our property," I corrected gently. "You've been mistaken." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "You can't just show up here with your little papers and think—" But Noah was already speaking to the sheriff, who produced a set of stamped documents. "This is a court-issued order," he said, his tone professional but final. "Ownership of the Harper Ranch reverts to Mrs. Zelda Harper, effective immediately. You and Mr. Pierce are hereby ordered to vacate the premises. Any ongoing business or personal activity on this property ceases as of today." Donna blinked, momentarily stunned. "That's ridiculous. Evan signed—" "Under duress and fraudulent terms," Noah interjected smoothly. "Your refinancing attempts and forged documents were reviewed by the county's fraud division. I believe Ms. Sophie Lynn can confirm the report later this week." Gerald stepped forward, face red. "You can't prove that." Noah handed him a photocopy of the fraudulent application, complete with his handwriting and timestamp. Gerald's mouth opened, then shut again. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Folks, let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Donna turned to Evan, desperation creeping into her voice. "Tell them this is a mistake. You can fix this." Evan's eyes met mine, then hers. "It's not a mistake," he said quietly. "It's over." Her expression shifted from fury to disbelief. "You ungrateful boy." Marissa stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "He's not ungrateful. He's free." Donna's lips curled. "Free? You'll be nothing without us." I watched her closely then, not with anger, but a strange kind of pity. She didn't understand that power built on deceit always crumbles when truth arrives with paper in hand. The sheriff gave them 20 minutes to gather their belongings. Donna stormed inside, slamming doors and muttering curses that echoed through the hall. Gerald followed silently, clutching a folder of his own, a stack of invoices that meant nothing now. When they emerged, Donna's hair was disheveled, her blouse wrinkled. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll see what happens when you embarrass people like us." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't embarrass you, Donna. You did that all by yourself." As she stomped toward her car, a check slipped from her purse, fluttering to the ground. The sheriff picked it up, glanced at it, and handed it to Noah. The amount was large, $25,000, made out to Harper Ranch Management. The bank's red stamp across it read, "Insufficient funds." Noah folded it neatly and handed it to me. "For your records," he said quietly. I took it without a word. The neighbors had begun to gather along the fence line, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Ruthie, arms crossed, her face unreadable. When Donna's car sped past, kicking dust into the air, Ruthie raised an eyebrow. "Well," she said, "I guess that's what sunrise justice looks like." I smiled faintly. "It's quieter than I expected." She stepped closer. "You did right, Zelda. Not everyone could have done it this way." "It wasn't about winning," I said. "It was about ending." When the last of the vehicles disappeared down the hill, the ranch fell silent again. Evan stood beside me, his eyes wet, his expression hollow. "I didn't think it would happen like this," he whispered. "Things rarely do," I said. "But now, maybe, they can start again." He nodded slowly. "I want to fix it, Mom. All of it." "Then start with Sam," I said. "Pay him what he's owed, and then fix that fence you never finished." A faint smile crossed his face, fragile but real. "Yes, ma'am." Noah closed his folder and turned to me. "It's official," he said. "You're back on record as owner." I exhaled, the breath trembling out of me like air from a long-sealed room. "Thank you, Noah." He nodded. "You did most of it yourself. I just helped the paper speak." As the sun rose higher, light spilled across the land, the same land that had once been a gift, then a battlefield, and now, finally, a home again. I walked a few steps toward the barn, the gravel crunching softly under my shoes. The smell of hay and dust filled the air, familiar and grounding. I stopped at the fence, touching the wood that Evan had promised to fix. The morning breeze brushed against my face, carrying the faintest sound of horses in the distance. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's done, Henry." For the first time in months, the air around me felt still but alive. Justice had come, not with shouting or vengeance, but with quiet proof and steady hands. As I turned to head back toward the house, Ruthie called out, "Coffee later?" "Only if you bring pie," I said. She grinned. "Done." And just like that, the day began again, simple, unremarkable, and beautifully fair. The next morning was still and golden, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, not silence, but peace holding its breath. I sat on the porch of the ranch house with 2 cups of coffee, one steaming gently in front of the empty chair beside me. Evan came out a few minutes later, his steps heavy but unhurried. He looked exhausted, but there was something new in his posture, a hint of surrender that wasn't defeat, more like humility finally taking root. He sat down without speaking. For a while, we just watched the field together. The horses were grazing again near the fence, the air soft and clean after the dust of yesterday's reckoning. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost hoarse. I keep replaying it in my head, he said. The sheriff, Donna's face, the neighbors watching. I don't know what to feel. Start with gratitude, I said quietly. Then work your way toward responsibility. He gave a short, bitter laugh. I don't know if I deserve either. You don't, I said simply. But you can earn them. He looked down at his hands, the skin rough and cracked from the past few weeks of stress and work. When you showed me that envelope, I thought you were ending my life. I was ending the lie, I said. Sometimes they're the same thing for a while. He turned to look at me. I've been angry with you for years. I thought you looked down on me every time I failed. But now I see. You were just disappointed that I stopped trying. I nodded slowly. That's true. The wind moved through the trees then, carrying the faint scent of hay and soil. It reminded me of the first week we bought this place, when the land was just wild grass and promise. Evan's voice trembled when he spoke again. When Dad died, I tried to fill his shoes. I thought success meant never asking for help. I thought strength meant pretending. But all I did was build a life that couldn't stand on its own. Your father didn't build this place with pride, I said. He built it with work. There's a difference. He nodded, staring out at the field. I can still hear him sometimes. That steady tone. He'd tell me, a man's worth isn't in what he owns, but in what he keeps honest. A long pause settled between us. Then he said softly, You didn't have to save me, Mom. I didn't deserve it. I took a slow sip of coffee. I didn't do it because you deserved it. I did it because I could. And because letting you lose everything wouldn't have taught you the right lesson. It would have just confirmed the wrong one. He was quiet again, tracing circles on the wooden armrest with his thumb. I don't know how to start over. You don't, I said. You start small. You start repairing. I reached into my bag and handed him a folded piece of paper. Your first task, I said. He opened it. The list was handwritten, neat, deliberate. Pay Sam Becker in full. Replace the broken fence post near the barn. Write an apology to every worker who stayed through this mess. Meet Noah for a financial literacy session, twice a week. Keep this ranch open, honest, and debt-free for 1 full year. When he finished reading, he looked at me with disbelief. You're serious? Completely, I said. You want my trust back? Earn it through work, not words. He swallowed hard, then nodded. I'll do it. Good, I said. And when you're done, you can have this. I pulled the envelope from my bag. The same one, now sealed again. But not before. He reached for it instinctively, but I drew my hand back. Not yet, I said. Paper may save you, but integrity keeps you free. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he leaned back in the chair, the faintest trace of a smile breaking through the exhaustion. You're still the toughest woman I know. I smiled faintly. And you're still the boy who once fixed my clock just to prove you could. He laughed softly. I remember that. I put the gears in backward, didn't I? You did, I said. But you tried again until it worked. He nodded, his expression growing serious. I'll fix this too, I promise. Good, I said. But don't promise me. Promise yourself. The sun rose higher, flooding the fields with light. Sam's truck appeared in the distance, bouncing along the dirt path. He's early, Evan said. He's always early, I replied. That's what honest men do. We watched as Sam pulled up, stepping out with his usual quiet nod. Evan stood and walked toward him. I stayed seated, letting them talk privately. I could see the handshake from where I sat, awkward at first, then firm, real. A debt repaid, not just in dollars, but in dignity. When Evan returned, he didn't sit. "He's helping me with the fence after lunch," he said. "Good," I said. "You'll learn more from that fence than from 1,000 apologies." He smiled, faint but genuine. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" "Nothing worth keeping ever is," I said. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, then looked out toward the horizon. "You know, for the first time in a long while, I feel like I can breathe." "That's what truth feels like," I said quietly. The morning light shifted then, bathing everything in soft gold. For the first time in months, I saw my son not as the man who'd betrayed me, but as the man still trying to remember who he was. I stood and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You broke my heart, Evan, but you're still my reason." He closed his eyes, the words hitting deeper than anything else I could have said. When I walked down the steps, I didn't look back. Some moments don't need to be witnessed to be real. The work ahead would speak for itself. Behind me, I heard the sound of a hammer striking wood, the first nail of his redemption. By mid-August, the ranch had a different rhythm. The laughter that once came from pool parties was replaced by the sound of hammers, the rustle of hay, and Sam's deep voice giving quiet instructions. The air smelled of earth again, not chlorine. For the first time in months, it felt alive. Every morning, I arrived just after dawn, sunrise. Evan would already be out by the fence line, sleeves rolled up, a bucket of nails at his feet. The old boards had been replaced one by one, slowly, unevenly, but honestly. Each time I watched him work, I could see the small shifts, his shoulders straightening, his words fewer, his patience longer. Guilt had turned into labor, and labor into peace. One morning, as I handed him a water bottle, he smiled faintly. "Fence should be done by next week," he said. "Then I'll move on to the irrigation lines." "Keep going," I told him. "You're not just fixing wood, you're fixing a story." He nodded. "It feels that way." Marissa spent her days sorting through the mess her parents left behind. The boxes, receipts, fake contracts, all of it sat in the office like the remains of a storm. She came to me one afternoon with a folder in her hands. "Noah asked for everything," she said. "He's preparing the case." "Are you ready for what that means?" I asked, glad. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, they need to be held accountable, even if they're my parents." Her voice trembled on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the conflict inside her, a daughter torn between loyalty and truth. But she stood taller now, stronger. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said. "I'm doing it so it ends." "That's the right reason," I said. "Endings can be merciful if they're honest." Later that week, Noah came by with papers. "The fraud investigation is official," he said. "Donna and Gerald will face civil penalties. No prison time if they cooperate, but their credit, business, and social standing will be finished." I nodded slowly. "That's enough." He smiled faintly. "You always knew where the line was." In the days that followed, the community began to return. Ruthie brought pies and small jars of jam. The neighbors who had once avoided the property stopped by with kind words and offers to help. Word spread quietly. The Harpers were rebuilding. One Saturday afternoon, we organized a small fundraiser for local veterans, the first event under the ranch's real name again. The banner was hand-painted by the children from town. Harper Ranch Community Day. There was no champagne, no fireworks, just laughter, sunlight, and the kind of warmth that can't be bought. Evan manned the grill, laughing awkwardly with Sam, who teased him about his cooking. Marissa handled the donations table, her face bright for the first time in months. I stood near the edge of the crowd, watching them all move together, the slow, beautiful rhythm of people learning to heal without spectacle. As the day drew to a close, Ruthie came to stand beside me. "Never thought I'd see this place come back to life," she said. "Neither did I admitted. She nudged my shoulder lightly. "You did good, Zelda. Quiet justice. No noise, no shouting, just proof and patience. That's all it will ever takes," I said softly. When the last guest left and the sun dipped low, Evan walked over, wiping his hands on a towel. "We made enough to fund the local food drive for 3 months," he said. "That's something to be proud of," I replied. He nodded. "It's the first time I felt proud in a long while." Marissa joined us then, holding her phone. "I blocked my mother's number," she said quietly. "I don't want to hear her voice again. I want to build something different." Evan reached for her hand. "Then let's build it here." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves of the sycamores near the barn. It felt like the ranch itself was breathing again, lighter, freer. As the evening settled in, Sam loaded his truck and tipped his hat. "See you tomorrow, boss," he said to Evan. Evan smiled. "Yeah, tomorrow." I lingered behind as they went inside, the last of the daylight fading. The fence line stretched clean and straight now, no broken boards, no unfinished corners. It wasn't perfect, but it stood tall, and that was enough. I walked slowly toward the porch, the boards creaking under my steps. Inside, I could hear Marissa humming softly, the clink of dishes being put away. Evan's voice followed, low and calm. No tension, no pleading, just family. I paused at the door, looking back over the land one more time. This ranch had seen arrogance, deceit, and heartbreak. But now, it carried redemption. Every blade of grass, every repaired post, every quiet laugh from inside the house whispered the same truth. Healing doesn't always need noise. Sometimes it just needs work. Before heading home, I turned off the porch light and stood for a moment under the soft glow of the moon. The night felt kind. The ghosts of what had happened here seemed at last to rest. And for the first time since I'd handed Evan the keys, I felt ready to let go. This time, not out of faith, but out of peace. The morning air was cool when I drove up the familiar dirt road one last time. The ranch stood quietly against the soft gold of early autumn. Fences mended, paint fresh, the scent of earth and hay thick in the air. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home again, though not mine to live in. When I stepped out of the car, I heard laughter from inside the house, warm and unforced. Marissa was in the kitchen, humming as she set out breakfast. Evan was at the wall, hammer in hand, a small frame balanced on his palm. "Morning," I said, stepping through the doorway. He looked up and smiled, tired but real. "Morning, Mom." I set my bag down. "What's all this?" "Finishing touches," he said, holding up the frame. Inside was a faded photograph, the one I thought had been ruined months ago. The three of us, years younger, sitting on the hood of the old truck, the vineyard stretching behind us. My husband's arm around my shoulders, Evan perched between us, squinting against the sun. The glass had been replaced, the photo cleaned and straightened. "Where did you find it?" I asked. "Sam kept it," he said. "Said it didn't feel right to throw it away." He climbed the small step stool and hung it carefully on the wall above the dining table. For a moment, we both just stood there, looking at it. "You know," I said softly, "that was taken the day we closed on the old place. Your father made us stand there for 20 minutes just to get the lighting right. Evan chuckled. He said it mattered. It did, I replied. He wanted proof that we started as a family, not as a business. Evan turned toward me, his voice low. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that. You remembered, I said. That's what matters. He nodded, then glanced at the photo again. I think he'd be proud, don't you? I smiled. Yes, because you learned the hardest lesson he ever tried to teach, how to fix something without destroying it. Marissa came over with a tray of coffee. We were going to have breakfast on the porch, she said. You'll stay? For a little while, I said. We stepped outside together. The porch looked different now, clean, calm, alive. Ruthie waved from across the fence where she was hanging laundry, and Sam drove past in his truck, honking once before disappearing down the dirt road. Simple signs of life returning to its rhythm. Evan poured coffee into my cup. We finished paying Sam yesterday, he said. Every cent. And the new orchard's planted. He says the soil will take well to it next spring. That's good, I said. It means the land still forgives us. He looked at me with quiet gratitude. So do you? I paused, then reached into my bag. From it, I took the same envelope that had carried so many versions of our story. Love, trust, betrayal, justice. Its edges were softer now, its paper worn, but it still held its quiet power. I placed it on the table between us. You've earned it, I said simply. His eyes widened. You're giving it back? I nodded. It was never about taking it from you. It was about reminding you what it means to own something. Not the land, but the weight of it, the responsibility, the history. He took the envelope slowly, like it might crumble if handled too roughly. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, I said. Just keep it safe this time. He looked down at it for a long moment, then whispered, I will. The breeze moved across the porch, stirring the curtains through the open window. From inside, the sound of Marissa's laughter floated out. Light, easy, the kind of sound that once seemed impossible in this house. I stood, brushing off my hands. Well, I should be going, I said. Evan rose too. You don't have to rush. I do, I said gently. You don't need me here anymore. That's how I know it's right. He followed me to the car, the gravel crunching under our feet. When I opened the door, he said, Mom? I turned. He held up his phone, a small, hopeful smile on his face. Before you go. A few minutes later, as I drove down the road, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan, the photo he'd just hung on the wall, the three of us smiling, the repaired fence visible through the window behind it. Below it, a short text. Fence fixed. Thank you. I slowed the car and pulled over by the old oak tree where my husband used to park during harvest season. The sun was rising higher now, the light cutting through the mist, turning everything gold. I looked at the message again, then at the photo on my phone screen. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn, only something to release. As I sat there, the breeze moved through the grass, whispering softly like a voice I'd known all my life. If they ever make you doubt yourself, remember who you are. I smiled. I remember, I said quietly. The ranch stood in the distance, strong and steady. The ring on my hand caught the sunlight, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a promise kept. I started the engine, the tires crunching softly over the gravel. As I drove away, I whispered the words I'd carried through every moment of this journey. I handed him an envelope that changed everything. And maybe, saved him too. The road curved gently toward the horizon, where the sky opened wide and bright, a reminder that some stories don't end in silence, they end in peace.